In this movie, we're going to look at how you can extend existing scenery and create new scenery using the Construct tool. For example, you could do this to create a new wall that is in the same plane as an existing wall, or add a hedge or a fence in a new plane. And let's look at how we can do this. I've opened this EPIX file and I'm going to create a new wall between these two columns here. So I'll first switch to the Construct tool over here on the Tools toolbar, and on the Tool Options toolbar I'm going to ensure that the Replace Farther Pixels Construct option is selected. And this means that Piranesi will replace all pixels deeper than the point at which I click. And I'm going to choose the Fill tool to apply the paint. I'm going to select a wall texture from the Real World texture library. And you can choose any wall you like. I've chosen red brick, which will contrast nicely with the current column texture. Now, when I click on the front face of any of these columns, a new plane is constructed along the face, which has the texture I chose. I'll use the undo command to undo this effect, and now I'll click on the front face of this column base, and the new plane moves forward a bit, and I'll undo this again. The Construct action can be used more effectively here when applied with the brush. This gives me control over where the wall is created. I'll use a round brush with 0 softness. And now I'll create an adjoining wall between the two gates. I'll do this by pressing the mouse button on the front column face here, and then I'll drag into the space between the gates and paint in the area. The wall now fits between the columns, but notice that the top is not very straight. I can correct this in Piranesi quite easily. First, I'll set an on-screen direction using the tool's advanced settings. I'll set the brush constraint to fixed direction, and now click the Pick button to define the direction. And I'll click on the column here. This sets the brush direction to normal, which means that it will be perpendicular to this wall. So I'll align my mouse pointer at where I want the top of the wall to be, and I can constrain the paint to the set direction by pressing Shift. So I'll press Shift and press the mouse button and then drag the paint over to the other column. This creates a straight line in the direction I have set. Now I can release the Shift but keep the mouse button pressed and continue painting. I need to create the wall using one continuous paint action because I will use Reapply in the next steps, and Reapply redoes only the last paint stroke. If I look at the material name of the wall on the status bar, I see that it is called Column. This is because I have Same as Material at Start selected on the Construct settings here. I'll change this to New Name each time, and keep in the base name Construct. I'll now reapply the wall. And now when I check the material name of the wall, it has changed to Construct 1. And each time you create a new construct this way, its material will be named Construct 1, Construct 2, and so on. Until now, we've been using the Replace Farther Pixels construct mode that replaces pixels behind the selected plane. I'll now show you the other replacement options. And we'll start by painting a red brick wall from the left-hand column. With fixed direction still active, I'll switch the mode to Replace All Pixels. I'm going to draw the wall to align with the front face of the left column. This time, pixels appear everywhere I paint with the brush. If I switch to Replace Nearer Pixels and reapply, you can now see only the pixels that lie on planes in front of the column face. And if I now select the Include Pixels in Plane checkbox on the Advanced Settings palette and again reapply, all pixels that lie on the column face are now included. And I'll switch back to Replace Farther Pixels, and I'm also going to clear the Include Pixels in Plane checkbox and reapply the effect. This is the option we used for the previous wall. in which you only see what covers pixels behind the column face. We can also move the wall back or forward from a selected plane. So I'll enter an offset here of -500mm, and when I reapply, you'll see that the wall is now aligned closer to the back of the column. I'm now going to show you one more construct effect, so I'll undo all my painting. And although I could undo each paint action individually, I'll use the revert command to return to the last saved state and confirm. Using the style selector, I'm going to open the construct category and select the style railings created with a brush. Now this texture is an alpha texture, though it has its own colour. And this means that white areas of the image actually appear transparent when painted onto a scene. To add some colour to the railing, I'll choose a colour such as this green and reduce the texture amount so that the colour can show through a little. I'll now switch to fill so that the railing can be created with one click. First, on the advanced settings, notice that the railing image repeats only in X. This makes sense here as the fence should extend to either side but should not stack vertically, and the hook point is at the bottom of the image. So when I click the front face of any of these column bases, the railing is applied to that plane. And by adding an offset of say -750mm and then reapply, the fence moves back a bit. Okay, so we've looked at constructing scenery in a 3D view. We're now going to take a brief look at how we can use Construct to create depth and material information in a 2D image. This will then give much more control over painting the image using the Piranesi locks. I've opened this plan view of a house and gardens. If I look at the material and depth channels in turn, I can see that there is currently no material or depth information. This is indicated by a solid black material view and a solid grey depth view. So let's start adding some materials and depths to the image. I'm going to open a style library that I've created for this part of the movie here in the style selector. I'll set the view to details and I'll now apply the first style 01 borders. This style uses the construct tool with a contiguous fill. We have replace father pixels selected here, and on the advanced settings palette we have include pixels in plane selected too. We also have an offset of 25mm and a new material name of soil. The offset doesn't have any real-world significance, but we want to have some different depths to work with. I'll now click on the border areas in the scene. And when I move the pointer over the painted areas, I see a new material called soil is shown on the information toolbar. And looking at the Z coordinate, the painted area is at 25mm, making the new plane closer to the eye than the base drawing. Using the style 02 pond, I'll click in the pond area. This style also uses the construct tool, but without an offset, so that the level of the pond will be below the level of the borders. I'll now paint the lawn and roofs using the saved styles. And these styles also use the construct tool to create new materials and depth information. The lawn is created above the pond and solid, and the roofs are 1 metre above the pond. Again, the different depths are used to create geometry to work with rather than for any realistic effect. To complete the scene, I'll paint the drive area with a raster texture which uses the construct tool with an offset of 0.05 metres. And finally, I'll apply the style 04 paving and click in the remaining blank space. Our image now has several depths and materials to work with. And to quickly demonstrate this, I'm going to mow the lawn using a material lock. We can use the material lock because we now have several materials to work with. And we can see this by switching to the material channel. And back again. And by pressing Shift, I can constrain the brush stroke to the horizontal image axis, giving a realistic impression of a mowed lawn. And that concludes this short introduction to constructing and extending scenery.